Well, hello, beautifuls. All right, I wanted to come on for day 8 of the 30 days of transformation. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about anxiety and my journey with anxiety and some of the things that I have found that have really helped with my anxiety. So I know that this is something that a lot of the community in here struggle with. I know it's something that a lot of the business community in general struggle with, a lot of mums struggle with. And so I felt like this could be a good opportunity to just open up a conversation about, firstly, how normal anxiety is, to also let people know that it's a good idea to reach out for help with anxiety. It is not something that you have to live with. And I want you to know that there is help out there in all different ways, shapes, or forms. Please know that this is not medical advice. This is simply me sharing my story and some of the things that have worked for me and that I have tried. Because I feel like that will resonate with a lot of you. And it might just spark in you an idea for how you might be able to manage your anxiety better. Please also know that I fully understand that anxiety can be part of or the whole of mental health conditions, and I would never want anyone to go against advice from their doctor or not reach out for that advice in the first place. So I just wanted to say that before I get started. But I wanted to share a bit of your journey, a bit of my journey with you guys. So I don't actually remember a time in my life where I wasn't experiencing anxiety of some sort, okay? I remember being an anxious child. I remember my mom and dad saying things to me about me being anxious and, telling me not to worry and all of those kinds of things. So I literally do not remember not having some sort of anxiety going on about something or someone or just in general. And I can definitely see that throughout my teenage years, I spent a lot of time anxious and a lot of time worrying. And it has really been a big part of my life. And I would have to say that I was at the point where I thought that that was normal. I thought that that was kind of the only way to operate. I thought that it was the way that I operated, and so that was the way the rest of the world operated. And it's interesting because on the other side of that, I can see that that's definitely not the truth. But because I believed that it was normal, it became normal. And my brain, just like we were talking about yesterday, filtered out all of the examples of how that was not normal, basically. And I just learned to function really well with anxiety, basically. It was just a part of day-to-day life. And I'd love for you guys to comment down below if you are one of those people who has experienced anxiety regularly or at some point, because I don't think there's anyone out there that hasn't. But this was a daily thing for me. Like all the time. I would worry excessively about everything that was going on around me. And being around people who didn't worry triggered the shit out of me. Because I was like, why are you not worrying? You must be worrying, but you're just not telling me. Because my brain was running a script that it was normal to have anxiety. It was normal to worry. It was normal to sometimes be paralyzed by that anxiety. And over the years, I had had quite a few periods where I had experienced anxiety attacks or panic attacks in different shapes and forms. But I just convinced myself that it was totally normal, that it was just a part of life. And it's been interesting as I've come into my business journey because one of the things about running a business is that, you feel quite responsible for the business and you feel responsible for the team and you feel responsible for the results. And it's probably a level of responsibility that's a little bit different to being in a workplace. And it certainly was for me. And so it probably heightened that anxious feeling. And I was definitely still in the place where I felt like, anxiety was normal. And that everyone must have anxiety, and that there was, I was just like everybody else. And then I really started to do some work around self-development. And the thing that really first kind of tweaked me and trigged me to the fact that maybe it didn't need to be like this was I heard somebody explain and say the saying that people who feel guilty are living in the past, and people that feel anxious are living in the future. And that the key to not feeling guilty and not feeling anxious was to be able to live in the present. And I remember when I first heard that, I was like, that's great. Like, awesome. But I have no idea how to live in the present. And when I really started to think about it, I totally understood that I spent basically my entire life either living in the past or living in the future. So I was either living feeling guilty about something that had happened previously. It could have been 2 minutes ago, 10 hours ago, 3 years ago, or 30 years ago. Or I was thinking about something that was coming ahead, and I was worrying and anxious about something that was coming ahead. And I spent a lot of my life in the anxious for what was coming ahead place. And I would be thinking about, what was coming up for me, what was coming up for my children, what was coming up for the family, for the business, for work. And I would spend so much time thinking about all of that I was missing the present. And I realized that I was missing out on the day-to-day fun and joy and sorrow and just the emotions and the things in the moment. And I started to really watch my children and realize that they were super good at just living in the moment. Although my older girl does struggle sometimes with anxiety about things. And I really just became aware that there was maybe a different way to do things, and that maybe it didn't have to continue to be how it was. And I wasn't really 100% sure what that was going to look like, or how the hell, I wanted to say another word there, but how the hell I was ever going to get to that place where I wasn't super anxious. Because as I said to you, I'd convinced myself it was normal. It was the only thing I could remember. And that was kind of, what it was. And I started to notice that, I had this conversation once with my beautiful partner and said, don't you worry? Don't you get anxious about things? And she said, yes, I do. Big things. And I thought, oh, and I said, okay. And she said, you worry about everything, not just the big things. You worry about the tiny, minuscule, small things, and about things that in the end don't really matter. And it was a massive realization for me that I was literally living tied up in a knot about inconsequential things. And that was when I knew that I wanted it to change, because I still wanted to worry about the big stuff. I still think about what it's going to be like when my kids go to high school, or, what they're going to be when they grow up. I still think about and am anxious about leaving my job in 5 weeks' time and never going back, because they're big life things. But I have been able to let go of the little worries, the worries about things that are not going to change, that I don't have control over. And I have also learnt to exercise 100% responsibility over the things that I do have control over. And I talked about 100% responsibility a couple of days ago. And that's why I talked about that first, because I also realized that I ultimately have 100% responsibility for how much of the time I spend living in the future feeling anxious, or how much of my time I spend living in the past feeling guilty. So I would love to know if you resonate with that, because I am talking to a lot of business owners at the moment about their mindset, doing a lot of coaching sessions off the back of the new training that I've done. And anxiety and worry is something that is coming up a lot. And it is undermining so many amazing women's ability to take their businesses to the next level, to have confidence to put amazing offers out there, to pivot and do what they really want to be doing, because they're anxious and they're worried about what it's going to look like, what's going to happen in the future. Now, anxiety and worry have their place, but when they absolutely rule your life, then that is a problem. And I have really come to recognize that they were ruling my life. So as promised, before I finish up, I want to just share with you a few of the things that I have done that have really changed the story for me when it comes to being anxious. And I want to be really clear to let you know that this does not mean that I am carefree and worry-free all the time. I still experience profound moments of anxiety. But I have some tools and techniques that I use now to deal with that anxiety. I basically have a support system built for that anxiety. And that's not just people, but it's things that I do. So let me share a few of those things. The first thing that I have is a couple of people that I confide in when I am anxious, that are willing to be honest with me about whether these things are worth being anxious about or not. One of them is my partner. I also make sure that I have at least one coach in my life that is dealing with not just business stuff, but mindset stuff. And then I have some other things that I do. So I do journal a lot about the things that I worry about. And often when you talk to people and they're talking about manifesting and moving forward and all, like, you know, doing all the mindset work, it's all like rah, 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 focus on the positive. Don't think about the negative. But what I know now is that those things that I'm anxious about, those negative things, if I just push them down, push them down, push them down, push them down, they just bubble under the surface. And then as soon as I'm under a tiny little bit of pressure, up they come, and it's a freaking volcano. And it all just comes spewing back out. So what I needed was ways to deal with that. And so talking to those people is one of them. Journaling is another one. I journal out all the things that I'm worried about. I can literally fill a whole page of my journal with just all the things that could possibly go wrong. Okay? Because by getting them out, I've let go of them out of my body, and then I can see them on a piece of paper, and I can literally be like, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? What am I going to do if that happens? But also, what good could happen? Okay? So journaling works really, really well for me. As you guys know, I also do some meditation and hypnosis, which is really good for processing things that are going on, but also becoming present and getting into the moment. If you are not someone that has done hypnosis or meditation, have a look into it. I started off doing self-hypnosis. I now do meditation, and obviously I have hypnosis practitioners that I work with. But there's some amazing resources out there. The One Big Mind app is a great way to start with meditation. The Insight Timer app has lots of amazing things. The Harmony app has some amazing self-hypnosis. A lot of those things are free, and they can be a really great way to get into it, but that's really helped me to be more present. So there's kind of two pieces. One is being able to process the worries, and one is being able to be more present. And that's a few of the different things that I do, you know, on a daily basis to just start to really process the things that I'm worried about and anxious about, get myself back to being able to live in the moment, but also not just push all those feelings down, because ultimately they're just going to explode in a different way. I totally agree. Journaling is such a good way to stop the chatter in your head. Absolutely. So I wanted to talk about that, and I wanted to share that with you guys. There is a specific technique that is used in NLP for dealing with anxiety about particular events. And there's also an amazing technique that one of my trainers has talked about only recently, which is a worry time technique, which is basically similar in that it gives somebody the opportunity to literally get all their worries down, think about the worst case scenarios, but also think about what could go well and basically process through those feelings. I spent pretty much 34 and a half years of my life pushing that anxiety down. And it just exploded out in anger, in irritation, in fear, in emotional outbursts, in an inability to deal with things when things got difficult. And it wasn't super healthy. It wasn't great for me or for my family. And so going through these processes and using these techniques over the last couple of years has been literally life-changing. And like, I know everyone's like, oh, it changed my life. But it actually did, because now I have these ways to process the things that I'm worrying about, and I have these people to confide in and to talk to, and to really make sure that I am getting that emotion out in a constructive way and dealing with it, and then ultimately able to refocus myself back on the present. So I wanted to come in and share that with you guys, because I know that anxiety can be such a big problem for a lot of people. This doesn't replace medical advice. It is literally just my way of sharing my story and some of the things that have worked for me. As an NLP practitioner, I do have available to me a lot of tools that can really help with anxiety and overwhelm. So if you are stuck in this cycle and you really want to get off that anxiety train, reach out to me. I would absolutely love to have a conversation about that. But I really hope that me sharing my story turns on some light bulbs for some people and allows them to think a little bit differently about worry and anxiety, to know that it is normal, but it doesn't have to be life-consuming. And there's some really simple things that you could literally do today to start to release that anxiety. All right. Thanks, guys, for watching. I know this was a bit of a longer one, and I'll be back tomorrow with the next day of our 30 days of transformation. Have a great day.